I'm Brodor, and this is Why We Game. My guest today is Mike Webb, the Vice President of Marketing and Customer Service at Alliance Game Distributors. Now, unless I'm mistaken, I believe that Alliance is the proverbial king of the hill. Is that right, Mike?
Well, we are the largest hobby game distributor in the U.S. and intend to stay that way.
Right on, man. So we're here at Fort Wayne, Indiana. We're at the Alliance warehouse. This is warehouse number...
Warehouse 2.
Warehouse number,
warehouse.
Warehouse number 2, the best warehouse. Is that it? Is that why it's number 2?
The largest one.
Well, I got you. Is it like the Bill of Rights? Number 2 is the best. Is that? Yeah. I say that.
I like them all.
Yeah,
equally.
Me too. Yeah, 1, 2, and 13 are my favorites. Although number 4, that's a beast.
Without 1, we can't be doing this right now.
Right. So. No, that's exactly true. So could I get you, Mike, to scoot or pull your mic a little bit closer? That's perfect.
This better? Perfect.
Yeah, that's way better. Yeah, that's great. We're here today talking to Mike Webb about games, about gaming, and about game distribution. So, Mike, you're 50 years old. So
yes,
you're a few years older than me, and I'm outing you here, but you don't look 50. You look great for your age, although you've got some nice salt and pepper in the old goatee.
I have been trying to go gray since I was 22 years old.
Are you serious?
22 years old, I was actually managing the front office at a Marriott hotel. So as the front office manager, I looked too young for the position, so people would always ask me for my manager.
Yeah. And so you were a Mike born in the 70s with a baby face.
Precisely.
So obviously your parents don't love you, just like mine.
Totally. So I've been trying to go gray ever since. It's just now starting to hit the temples. I've been praying for that for years.
Yeah. Now I look like I did when I was in high school in terms of being chubby, wearing crappy t-shirts and cargo shorts and a backwards bell cap. So I've not changed at all other than getting grayer and maybe losing 2 or 3 pounds. But we're not here to talk about me, Mike. We're here to talk about you.
Woo.
So, I don't know which aspect about you that I am more interested in, and since this is a vanity project for myself, I'll just go the direction that I want to go. But
sure thing.
The show's about people who are gamers, who got into gaming as a profession. You're a little bit older than me, so we have some similar experience in terms of growing up during the time of the Satanic Panic, the sort of geek culture not being what it was. So what I want to do is I want to jump back in time to 1988. And Mike Webb is sitting at a table and he's playing GURPS for the first time. Now he doesn't know about GURPS, he doesn't know about role-playing games, but he's playing this GURPS game. I assume he's played a little bit of D&D prior to that, but there's something special about Steve Jackson's generic universal role-playing system that resonates with Mike Webb. So what is that?
Well, I had been raised on D&D, started with bought a red box at a garage sale in 1980. I had seen Traveler. I had played like Dungeon previously, the board game, and knew about D&D, but didn't own it until 1980. So I'd been playing since like 1979 to some extent. And I enjoyed the system, but what grabbed me about GURPS, it was right at the change between first edition to second edition D&D. And those edition changes can be on-ramps, but they can also be off-ramps.
Oh, no, I have a fantasy where there is an apocalypse, where we literally go to war, not over economics or racial tension, but over editions of Dungeons and Dragons.
It's, some people take it that seriously.
Yeah,
so,
and I have a gun safe at home that is ready for the 3-5ers. If you're a 3-5er and you need Sanctuary, you come to my home.
So, going from first edition to second edition, at that point I was in college, I had new people I was playing with. Basically a friend introduced me to GURPS, and I took a footlocker full of everything ever published for first edition and traded it out to a local store, Gundog Comics, which was literally their parents' feed store selling dog food for gun dogs, right? This is in Oktibbeha County, Mississippi. I was at Mississippi State University.
Wait, hold on. Oktibbeha? Oktibbeha County.
Mississippi. Yes, sir. Mississippi State.
PPI.
So I took that, traded it into them, used the credit to buy a bunch of GURP stuff, and I was just fascinated by you could be anything, you could do anything. You weren't stuck in a class system for I'm a magic user, I'm a fighter, I'm a whatever. It was build the character as you want. What really fascinated me, I think this was a little later on before this expansion came out, but there were expansions based on George R.R. Martin's Wild Cards. There were expansions based on Witch World where you actually played yourself as an option. There was an option to, here's how to have your group help build your character. And I just love that thought that you could be anything. And generic universal meant I could play anything I wanted to with it.
So what kind of stuff did you do with it? What are the kind of crazy adventures that you guys went on?
I mean, we all fell in love with Talislanta at the time too, but we actually...
Okay, so what is Talislanta?
Talislanta was a fantasy role-playing game that came out by Bard Games initially. I think White Wolf had it for a while. Wizards of the Coast had it for a while. It kind of rotated around a few different publishers. Talislanta was fantasy, but in a non-traditional vein. Their ads at the time were in Dragon Magazine everywhere, and it said, "No elves." Of course, they had, 3 or 4 different races that effectively lived in trees and elves and everything but name, right?
Right.
But they were really trying to break the mold from the traditional tokenesque racial breakdowns or species breakdowns in role-playing, and we appreciated that, but we loved the system so much more, we just wrote everything over and played it in GURPS. We did Star Trek, we did Star Wars, we did superheroes, we did whatever we wanted to do. Zombie apocalypse before zombie apocalypse was all in vogue like it turned into in the 2000s. Certainly there were zombie films, right? Well, we would play ourselves running around campus and get out maps of the campus we'd gotten from some friends to play. You could do anything with it, and that's what we loved.
Now, you're doing your gamer culture duty by propagating the next generation of gamer. Now, you took it upon yourself to raise a child, and not only raise a child, but to raise that child right and to teach them to do role-playing games.
Raise 2 children.
2 children. Yes. Oh, okay.
My daughter Olivia turns 27 next Monday.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you had a daughter that
absolutely.
Wow.
So we brought her up.
Hold on a sec. 27?
27.
You were 23 years old when you had your kid?
Yes, I was.
Oh, my God. That's not what this show's about. But Jesus Christ, there's no way. There's no way you're a kid having a kid. No, so you're 27.
Yep.
She's a gamer.
Oh, raised her own GURPS. She played some D&D. She played some Pathfinder. She's in a D&D game now, out where she lives. And, but we started her out with GURPS, started her out right.
All right. Now you, and Mike, I'm pretty profane, so don't play this in front of your son, but these fuckers don't understand how lucky they are. Not only are you raising gamers, you're raising a gamer girl, like you are diversifying the fan base of the industry. Well, you're a better person than most. You've done your responsibility.
I don't know about that, but I took that seriously. Look, the fact of the matter is, the only way I stay in scotch and scones until the day I die is if this industry is propagated to the next generation and the next. And I'll tell you, gaming has grown so much. Obviously, it was a very geeky thing to do when I was a kid. As they were coming up, it was way more mainstream, and now it's completely mainstream. So many of the games that people are playing online or that they're playing on their consoles grew out of role-playing in our business, and the authors that are writing those plot lines are generally authors that started in our business, especially the best of them. Take a look what's really hot coming up right now. Everybody's looking forward to Cyberpunk coming out on the consoles. And Cyberpunk, Mike Pondsmith, that was Cyberpunk 2020, man. We're living in 2020 now. It was Cyberpunk 2020 when I was a kid. We were talking about the dystopia and corporations running everything. Oh my gosh, it turned out to be more real than we thought. Maybe the tech's not quite where he had it, but we got a lot of problems. He recently said in an interview that Cyberpunk wasn't meant to be aspirational. Guys.
That's absolutely brilliant. Obviously, GURPS is not the only thing that you cut your teeth on, though. As a gamer coming up, what other stuff did you play?
Oh, a little bit of everything. I mean, once I discovered game stores existed, that became at least half of my reading entertainment. Even if I didn't play a game, I would go buy it to read it and borrow bits for it. Like, we ran D&D, we ran Star Frontiers when that came out, Gangbusters, we ran...
was Gangbusters a FBI sort of mafia era?
1930s mafia. Indiana Jones role-playing game when that came out. A little bit of everything. We're touching on GURPS as one of my lifelong passions, but the longest campaign I ever ran started in 1987 with West End Games when they put the Star Wars role-playing game out. And that game, that same timeline, existed across a changing number of characters, often with a lot of overlap, but I ran that campaign up until 2008. Just steadily. So for 21 years, we had a storyline building that was based off of a campaign I started in high school, because, Star Wars was such an amazing universe. What I love about gaming is if you take a look at Timothy Zahn's books, which we're talking early 90s, this is after, the shine's really off of Star Wars. A lot of people are seeing it as it was a fantastic thing, but the toy lines have died out.
Yeah, and just to give the audience an idea, if they don't know who that is, and you're a Star Wars guy, Thrawn.
Right.
That's all you need to know.
There we go, right? So,
right.
Tim Zahn goes...
Thrawn or Thrawn?
Thrawn.
Thrawn.
Yes.
All right, so I did it right the first time. I didn't know.
Mithranoroodu, if you want the full name.
Now, your skin took on a blue hue and your eyes got somewhat red when you said that.
They do glow red when I say it, yes. His books drew heavily on the role-playing game. The role-playing game had taken the universe that we knew from just this small group of heroic characters, and they had spread it out into, here's all the ships, here's all of the, here's this world that you can go play in.
Now, was that coincidence or deliberate? Was Timothy Zahn a gamer that just dumped all that stuff into the book?
Well, the way that Lucasfilm did the licenses is if you created something, they had the rights to use it in the future. So the role-playing game became a source book. The Star Wars source book and the Rebel Alliance source book and the Imperial source book all became background material for other people to use, which was brilliant from a license perspective. It's something you didn't necessarily see in other licenses like Star Trek, where a lot of the novels were just kind of encapsulated in their own. Later on, you start to see some of that in that fiction. But for a property that big to have a continually growing canon, even if it was, semi-canon at the time, it was its own history and its own canonicity, if you want to say.
Canonicity, is that we're coining
it is now.
Yeah, canonicity.
It is now.
Right on. Yeah. So you're my canonicity rating.
There we go.
Yeah. That's a new stat.
Anyway, it was fantastic to have that. And then, of course, so the game became some of the tech basis and some of the gearhead basis in the books. And then the books keep growing, and the books fed back into the role-playing game, and the role-playing game fed back into the books. It was a wonderful time to be alive and be a gamer.
Right, and then along comes the frozen head of Walt Disney and says, hey, you guys for decades built this expanded universe thing that was fucking brilliant. What we're going to do is we're going to shut it all down because it's mine.
At some point, you reach the point where, and this goes back to what we were saying about, edition changes, you need to create an on-ramp. And even on a product like Star Wars, they needed to create an easier on-ramp. There was all of these years of history and really deep and entwined stories, and some things people agreed with, some people things people didn't. Whereas you had the movie core that everybody loved. I understand them completely doing what they did. What I love that they've done since then is they have actually started bringing in bits of that canon back in. Tim Zahn again wrote a couple of books about Thrawn that you could read either as if they were continuations or prequels to his version back in the 90s or to the current version of it. They've brought those very popular pieces of canon back into canonicity through Star Wars Rebels or through new publications they're doing that they're saying it's canon. But the great thing about it is my mind canon is mine. My version of the universe, the things happened as I've set them up in my universe. I can pick and choose too, whatever I want. And, where I'm running the role-playing game, I'm not necessarily running in episodes 7, 8, and 9. I'm running a game back in the Rebellion era, and I'm running it from the Dark Horse and Timothy Zahn angles that it took. And that's the great thing about pop culture is we each can own a little bit of it ourselves. Now, that gets toxic when we try and force that on others or get mad at people that they might have gone a direction we don't personally agree with their property.
I mean, any hobby, really, whether it's sports or gaming or whatever. Gaming is what we do, so that is the lens with which I will view things. But the gaming hobby can become as divisive as politics.
We're passionate. Yeah. We're passionate about what we love. And you got Monday morning quarterbacks in sports. You've got, and we've got some aspects of that too, but it all grows out of a passion. That passion is fantastic, and that passion is why I love what I do for a living. I told my wife the day that I left the hotel business to go work, I went to run Zaki Distributing. As the general manager. Lou Zaki had been... That's
that cucumber yogurt sauce, right? That you put on a gyro? Is that what that is?
That would be Tzatziki, but very close. So Lou Zaki had been one of the first distributors in the business. Just to let you know, his account number with Wizards of the Coast was 00001. Okay, he was the first distributor back before Wizards of the Coast did Magic. Back when Wizards of the Coast did Talislanta, Primal Order, which was a series of role-playing supplements. I've got hanging in my office, and you should get a picture of it, an ad from the back of a Talislanta book talking about all the things that were coming out for Primal Order, all the things that were coming out for Talislanta, all these wonderful products, and then a paragraph saying, hey, there's this new card product that's coming this summer. It's gonna create a new niche in the hobby market. It's gonna be a magical summer. Well, that was the summer that Magic was born. But before they were doing that, they were doing role-playing supplements, others. So anyway, Lou Zaki was one of the first distributors in the business. He sold his business to Mike Hurdle, who ran a game store that I gamed at and ran games for him at the store. And he asked me to come down and run that in 1997.
And that was not Gundog, right?
No, that was not Gundog.
What was this shop called?
No, this shop was Game Masters. It was in Memphis, Tennessee.
Game Masters.
Yep.
All right. That's a good name, especially for back in the day.
It was our Cheers. It was where you go, you walk in and they knew your name. They called out to you and everybody went there, and that was, we talk a lot about third place theory. Everybody needs a third place. You got work, you got home. Where's the other place that re-energizes you? And Game Masters was a magical place that was that third place for so many of us. I've got lifelong friends that came from there that I've been in touch with literally every day since. I've got a friend that works here at Alliance that worked with me at Zaki and then worked at Diamond and came over to Alliance to work here, that was from that gaming group. And it's just really a tight group of friends.
So how long were you with Zaki?
I was with Zaki for 3 years and then came to work for Alliance. There were 2 other companies that were contemporaries of Lou's, a little later than him, Chessex Distribution and The Armory.
Now, Chessex people know listening because of, all the sweet dice that come from
Exactly.
Germany. Yeah.
So Chessex had been a distribution company and a dice manufacturing company, and Chessex and The Armory merged to become Alliance, and that was 1998. A couple of years later, fast forward to 2000, I was recruited to come work with Dan Hirsch at Alliance, and jumped at the chance to. It was one of the largest distributors at the time, and certainly had a lot of good ideas about where they wanted to go in the future. And I moved to Baltimore, Maryland. Little Mississippi boy me from who had only lived in Mississippi and Tennessee ever, moves out to the Mid-Atlantic and becomes a Marylander.
That had to be quite a culture shock for you.
It was. It was a culture shock because to those who lived in the South, Maryland's a northern state, but to Maryland is a southern state, kind of on that borderline. The Mason-Dixon line is technically north of Maryland, so.
I'm a Missouri boy.
There we go.
And my family, most of them are, my grandfather was a first-generation American, so I come from immigrants. But, we all do. But the point is, they moved from the Northeast to Missouri. You moved from the South to the North. I can tell you definitively from someone from the very center of the country, this is how the rules work.
And I've moved further north now when I moved to Fort Wayne to move to a different office, so.
How did gaming differ when you moved? So you uproot, you're like, I'm going to go work for this Alliance company. I'm still gaming. How did you develop a new gaming group? Did you bring gamers with you? Did you already knew guys who were working at Alliance? How did that impact your third place, your hobby?
Sure. It took a couple of years to really find that. And when we moved, there were a number of stores. There's some fantastic stores there. Games and Stuff in Glen Burnie, Maryland was one of my favorite places to go to.
Now, Games and Stuff, that's Paul Butler, right?
That's Paul Butler, yeah. So this was before Paul was there, and that became a place that I would go and play a lot. One of the former owners actually got me involved to come down and play there when Ed Sloman ran the place. And so I'd play there some, but it was a long distance from where I lived. I lived in a suburb out, it would take me 22 minutes to get to Baltimore. So luckily about that time was when my daughter was coming of an age where she could play, and I just, I couldn't find a convenient place to go and play, so we just created our own gaming group with her and her friends.
So is your daughter still game?
Yeah. Yep. She's in a D&D campaign right now in Urbana, Illinois.
So she's in Illinois, you're in Indiana, so you guys don't game together much, I presume.
Don't get a chance to much.
But you game with your son who's just about turned 15, you said?
Yeah, he'll turn 15 in August.
And you guys are playing, what do you guys do? What do you play?
We've been playing 5th edition D&D. With a group of his friends and a couple of my friends that were in a Deadlands campaign that I played in a couple of years ago. I see you tearing up. I know you love Deadlands, man.
I do. I love Deadlands. So I am not obviously at this literal moment, but I am currently running a Deadlands game that is finally getting back together to meet face to face on the last Sunday of this month.
There we
We're
go.
Congrats, man. After months break. So, again, I'm not going to bore the audience with my bullshit, but so anyway.
So we haven't been able to play in a few weeks with everything, but we're getting that scheduled back up, and I've been using the time in between to plot very nefarious things for them to have to deal with. So they're really going to regret all the time that we've been out. And then they are getting close to the climax of this section of the D&D campaign. And what I love doing, kind of like television seasons, we'll get a season in of something, and then I'm ready for something that's a little different. You finish off a season of Westworld. I don't want to go right into another season of Westworld. I want to go see something else. So D&D, we're gonna wrap up this campaign to a point that's a good climax for this arc of story. And then we've got a Mutants and Masterminds campaign because they all absolutely love the superhero genre. And they've been, I think, more excited during the hiatus about building their characters and their backstories with each other, which is what I love.
Amen.
Building that backstory so that you've got it's not just you meet in a bar or you see something happening, all these superheroes come together. Who has a history with who and who doesn't have a history with who has animosity towards this other person, building in some hooks for conflict for the GM. Gaming has grown so much that's actually in the rules. You're walking around the warehouse here and you saw some Evil Hat stuff. Evil Hat, one of the things I love that they did with Fate, when they took the fudge system and made it into Fate, one of the things that's baked in is this concept of interplay between the players and the GM and creating those stories and creating some connection with the other players so you're never stuck for a storyline. As a GM, I've got a rich, diverse background. It's like I've got the Bible for the series. When they're doing a TV series, every season they'll have it.
Yeah.
Right, you got the show Bible so that you know how characters should interact with each other. And I am gonna grab some of those hooks and play them. And some of them they won't even recognize I'm doing for a while until they realize, that's some backstory I wrote. And now they feel more, drawn into the character than this is somebody they're playing that somebody else wrote. They're not just an actor, they're an actor who owns a character.
What's your gaming organization like then? Like, what is your gaming process? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't spoken to you other than on the phone for years.
Yeah.
But just sitting down with you again face to face, you strike me as someone who does a very good job of compartmentalizing home life, work life, game life, and having a good balance with those things. But you also strike me as somebody who is probably quite organized when it comes to their gaming. That's an area where I'm terrible, right? I mean, every campaign I get a little bit better, but I'm bad at creating the game Bible. So what do you do to keep all of this, 21 years of campaign information for a Star Wars game? How the hell do you keep all that straight? How do you remember it?
Notebooks. I do it poorly though, let me say. That's the reason I like that the characters are building these hooks these days, because that means I can rely on them to act appropriately for the hooks they've already built. They've given me something to latch onto, and then they get to flesh it out too. Previously, I had a overarching story. We were talking earlier before the interview about, I think our one of our favorite together science fiction, Babylon 5.
Oh yeah,
and I love the idea of an overarching storyline that can still play out episodically. I want each episode we play, which is every 1 or 2 or 3 sessions depending. Sometimes we have to stop in media res, right? But I want every little episode to be self-contained but somehow move the plot forward on the overarch.
And I know that he these days is persona non grata in the woke community, but a very Joss Whedon style structure of storytelling, or Buffy, or let's say Veronica Mars, where we've got an overarching meta plot of the season, and then we've got individual episodes, sort of monster of the week, but you're drawing threads that are tying all of these things together from one adventure to the next.
And the rarity may be having an individual episode that's completely standalone or completely nonsensical. You were talking about Whedon, talking about the musical episode of Buffy, right? Something that you throw out there for a special occasion. You're doing a Halloween game and it fits in within the arc, but really it's not part of the arc story.
Right, but it's not outside.
No clip shows though. No clip shows.
No, when you say no clip shows, you mean like introduction,
like writer strikes, like writer strikes. You get to the end of the second season of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and there's a show that makes no sense whatsoever. Well, that's because the writers were on strike, and all they had was old stuff to do. Right?
I gotcha. Well, I've done writer strikes as a game master. I just quit. We don't play this game anymore. I'm done. I quit. I hate this job. I'm over.
I think that's called canceling the season.
Yeah, well, I've canceled a lot of seasons in my time.
Sure.
Enough about you as a hobbyist, right? Let's talk about the hats that you wear working for Alliance. So your title is Vice President of Marketing and Customer Service.
Correct.
So that's 2 independent hats as a business person.
I've worn as many as 3. I was in charge of data services for years as well. Recently handed that off.
And data services was?
It included the back end, included programmers for our in-house system, so the warehouse management system as well as our accounting systems, et cetera. So how sales reps and operations interact with the system. So had that under my hat for some time as well.
There's a lot going on politically inside the United States. And I know that you're one person and it is not your responsibility to speak for Alliance or the game industry as a whole. So I'm not going to ask that. But in general, what is the hobby industry's responsibility when it comes to things like politics, to talk about political movements, to talk about COVID, Black Lives Matter, et cetera?
Gaming has always been a format that is inward looking, that looks at situations. Again, I was talking earlier about Mike Pondsmith. He's a black designer. With Cyberpunk 2020, it was a way of looking at, the end result maybe of some of the things we were seeing in the 80s. Mm-hmm. The end result of, of corporate governance, et cetera. So I think gaming's always been about, and the best science fiction, which is where gaming draws a lot from in fantasy, is about examining current situations and through a different lens so that maybe we can understand what's going on because we're seeing it through a lens that removes our barriers to thinking about it, that removes any cognitive schemata, my filter that I'm putting on things I'm seeing out in the world, and allows me to look at it differently. Again, Cyberpunk, some of the best games I ever played, dealt with issues that we're seeing dealt with out there today. And the other thing is, from a gaming community side, if you're an old school gamer like me, you come from a time when, and I'm in no way trying to draw a comparison between some of the racial issues that go on in the world today. Let me be absolutely clear there. But we were the outsiders. And we were the outsiders that were being ostracized. And as a result of that, it should be baked into our DNA as gamers to welcome a diverse crowd of people, to not punch down against them as they come into our market, to hear their stories as well. Because what is role-playing but me telling a story with you helping me tell the story? We're helping each other tell a story, and I've got to listen to your story. If I want the best role-playing game I'm ever going to have, I'm listening to what other people are having to say. I'm listening to what the overall story arc is that the DM's trying to give or the GM's trying to give. But more to the point, I'm listening to the other players, and we're playing off of that. Yes, there's conflict. And maybe in acting out some of that conflict within the grounds of telling a story, I can recognize the pain people are feeling in real life. I can recognize the hurt. I mean, there were plenty of things I went through whenever I was playing or running games. Some of the best sessions I ran when I was in my late teens, early 20s, dealt with, with some real world issues, dealt with some issues of what it felt like to be the guy that's being ostracized because we're huddled in a room somewhere playing a game while everybody else is out playing Ultimate Frisbee, right? It should be baked into our DNA to listen. It should be baked into our DNA to welcome people who have a different story than mine and a different worldview, a different alignment, if it were, a different racial experience and prejudices that go into that. That's all kind of baked into the storytelling we do. So I think from a business perspective, it's good for us to listen to that. From a personal perspective, it broadens all of us to be able to listen to those different voices and especially listen to the voices that are the most drowned out by just sheer numbers, because those are the stories that we really need to hear in order to be able to create a better story for all of us, and apply that as you will to overall life. I think if we ran our lives a little more like we run a good game, we would see those opportunities to hear, to listen, to adapt, to learn, and to welcome.
And the thing that really struck me about that is that you can experiment in games with those concepts. You can have a mulligan. You can have a do-over. The consequences at the game table, for the most part, are not real in terms of impact like they are on the street.
I do love that a lot of, if you're watching games happening at conventions, et cetera, there's been a movement, and I really appreciate this. And again, I think this is something we should be able to adapt into our lives outside of gaming. But there's a concept where if a storyline is going in a direction that really is disturbing for a player, they can lay a card out on the table and say, right, let's stop this. Because it's that respect of, I'm now touching on something that's too close to a real experience you had that may have been traumatic. I don't know who may have had a traumatic, brutal episode in their life. And if the story starts to go in a direction that's going to hurt them, I'm going to stop.
That's another reason I don't want to game with strangers. That's a whole nother, we could have a whole conversation about that. But
sure.
Again.
Well, see, I'm the other way. I want to game with strangers, but I recognize that requires taking a moment to know I want to be myself, but they need to be able to be their selves. And there's going to be sometimes I'm going to rein in my freedom that I've got to go whatever direction I want to. I'm going to rein that freedom in specifically because I want them to be welcomed and not to feel in any way pushed out of it, because that's the way to have the best experience together. It's nobody canceling anybody out. It's not them saying, I can't do this. It's me respecting another human being and saying, you know what? I'm going to stay away from the things that worry you, that bother you, but I still want to be able to tell a good story. So I'm not afraid to go up to the edge of that. And that's the reason the card's there, is because we're not saying ahead of time, all of these subjects are taboo. We're just going to have a dungeon crawl. I want to be able to explore these things and understand them, not to glorify them. Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu is based on Lovecraft's horror books, and it's cosmic horror, unfathomable horror to human minds, so much that it just drives people insane. It's one of the few role-playing games where you better not plan on having a character around long, because he's going to be in the sanatorium or dead within 3 or 4 sessions, right? If it's played well, if it fits the stories that Lovecraft himself told. Lovecraft, unfortunately, was a product of his times, and there's a lot of racial attitudes that come across in Lovecraftian stories and that come across in some of the early publications of Lovecraft role-playing. What I've loved seeing is people willing to deal with that from a standpoint of how wrong it is now. So we're telling stories now, and yeah, someone may choose to play a minority character in the 20s. But we're recognizing, in the midst of recognizing cosmic horror that's going on out in this Lovecraftian world, there's domestic horror we've created too, and recognizing that and dealing with it, not in a way that says this is okay or in a way that ignores that things have changed since Lovecraft's time, in a way that actually deals with some of that substantively. And you've got heroes who are true heroes who may save the day, but not get recognized in that community or in that time or in that place. And I love being able to so we're taking a meta spin on top of the Lovecraftian stories we're telling. And that's what I love about role-playing. That's what I love about the modern opportunities to take some ideas from the past and update them in ways that I think are more healthy, and also in ways that let us look at the experiences of others. To me, in the end, that's what is the greatest thing about role-playing, is hearing your story, knowing your story. I play Star Wars because it's the underdogs fighting against this oppressive government, and I love that idea. Not that I'm saying I want to go out right now and start a civil war in the U.S., but what I am saying is there's these undertones of playing the underdog so often. And if that makes us all more compassionate towards the real underdogs in the world, in all areas, all ways, all politics, all races, everything, if that makes me more compassionate, more able to hear and more able to find a joint good solution, my God, that's amazing. So that's sorry, went off on a tangent there.
No, that's great. I don't.
That is at the base of a
That was the best place to end. I'm kidding. I'm not ending it, but
that is the best thing about gaming, is teaching us to see through other people's eyes and seek common good solutions.
See, this is what I've learned about myself, and I know I'm not supposed to make this about me, but I look at it, you have a very healthy attitude. You have a very open perspective about things that I generally do not. You also have something about you that is not entirely unique in the hobby industry, but you have a strong faith background, if you're comfortable discussing that.
Sure, always.
Now, I grew up in a very Catholic home with a very Catholic family. One of my uncles was in seminary to become a Jesuit before he decided, I like girls. I want to do this whole sex thing, and he left. My point is that religion was something that has always been oppressive, suppressive to role-playing. I shouldn't say always, but was in the beginnings. So you grew up in a time where during the
Satanic Panic.
During the Satanic Panic, as someone of strong faith,
sure,
what was that experience like? Because you have this dichotomy of evil role-playing game from hell and path to salvation and the two butting heads.
Well, see, the thing is, they never really butted heads. They butted heads in the media. They butted heads in speculation. What I was lucky. I had a mother who took time and looked at these things, and she said, this is fantasy, right? Of course I know it's fantasy. Great. And in the midst of all of that, she was happy to have me have friends over and play the game, or me to go over to friends' houses. She knew we weren't on the street. Mm-hmm. She knew that we were reading, we were learning, we were interacting in ways that we were understanding other people. It was a diverse group of gamers then, and she supported that. She saw through the panic side of it to, No, what I see about this is good. I see my son reading Bulfinch's mythology. How many kids at 10 years old are reading Bulfinch's mythology? Well, I wanted to have a little bit of a Greek theme going on in my game. Kids play games and they take on personas that aren't really them. In doing that, this is just an adult version of doing that. This was just a more advanced way of doing that and dealing with stories and seeking a good end. I have played D&D with biblical guidance counselors. I made a point of talking with a pastor that I worked with a lot in my 20s. I've been an elder at a church, and I actually gave a talk to parents at a youth group talking about role-playing and talking about the origins of D&D. And there were some parents, this was in the early 2000s, there were some parents that were still worried, right, about D&D even then because they had grown up during the panic and maybe didn't understand it. And I sat down and talked and I said, you do realize if you take a look at D&D, how much of it is based off of Tolkien and Jack Vance? But Tolkien really is there, deeply there. Who was Tolkien's best friend in the world? C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis wrote books as well that have all these fantasy elements that were definitely purely allegorical. By his own admission and, attempts, he was definitely telling an allegory of the Christian tale of salvation. And then Tolkien is talking about this redemption from this darkness in the world and how it took self-sacrifice of individuals to do it. And 95% of the campaigns being played are people that are trying to triumph over evil. Okay, back then, maybe there were a few people trying to play it for evil, but those people, whatever they did, they would do it that way. It wasn't the gaming that made people go down any dark paths. People were going to be people. And what I saw was quite the opposite. I saw people who were introspective to a fault, introspective to an unhealthy degree, like myself, who came out of that shell. I will say, I'm a teaching pastor at the church I'm at currently, and gaming informed my faith. Gaming made me better at communicating ideas. And gaming better made me able to listen to other people to understand where they're coming from so that I'm not screaming at them. I'm not thumping a Bible in front of them. I want to hear their story. I want to know where they are in life. I've got a faith and I'm glad to share it with people, happy to share it with people. I do it all the time. And I'm in an industry where that hasn't always been the case. And there's certainly memories and vestiges of the panic in the 80s. But there's also a lot of people that are screaming and yelling and trying to force people into a belief instead of understanding where they're coming from. And then if I believe in free choice and I believe what I believe is true, I have to believe it is compelling. So I'm just going to live my life by that faith. And that includes my gaming. In doing that, hope other people ask why. And when they ask why, I'm going to tell them. This is why I believe. This is why Mike Webb believes Black Lives Matter. This is why Mike Webb believes that there's other places in the world where there are people that have life so much worse off than us. And why I go. I've done mission work and economic development work, helping businesses get started in India, in Ukraine. I helped lead groups that went to Guatemala. I've been in Haiti. My wife works for an organization right now that does aid work in Ethiopia and in Haiti, building businesses, helping develop sustainable businesses that don't rely on the white guy to come over and give money, to sustainable business opportunities for people living in literal slums in Ethiopia and orphans who are literal slaves this day in Haiti. And all of that grows out of, I think, the experiences that we had before, and gaming played a part in that.
Well, now I feel like an asshole asking you about Alliance Games and the hats that you wear at Alliance Games. But, anybody who knows me knows that I'm an asshole, so here we go.
Lovable.
Lovable. Thank you. Lovable asshole. I appreciate that. Well, you said some very nice things to me on the phone the other day that made me all blush. But anyway.
Are you verklempt?
I am verklempt, yeah. So you've got two hats that you wear.
Yes.
Here at Alliance.
Right.
Marketing,
and
Vice President of Marketing, and Vice President of Customer Service. Let's talk about customer service.
Sure.
Now, your customer is the retailer.
Correct.
Right? Your customer is not me, Brodor, going to the game store to buy a copy of Band of Blades. Your customer is the game store, Scott Thorne's Castle Perilous, right?
Correct.
He orders from you, for example. And so he's the person that you're working with to make sure that product gets to the end consumer. But in terms of customer service, what kind of customer service issues do you run into? What kind of things do you provide to the retailer that the consumer might not understand how the process works?
Sure. I mean, there's such a broad question. There's a lot of things. The long and short of it is, let me just start with just a highlight of what it is that we do, because then I can show you where there's some of the things that I think there's not a lot of understanding at the consumer level of all that has to go into getting a product to shelf. At Alliance, we publish a magazine. We have an online channel, Game Trade Media, Game Trade Magazine, and we try and do what's called pull marketing. Publishers will create a product and they'll market to consumers. They're talking to the consumers about how cool the product is. My job is to get those consumers seeking that product through the local stores or through the stores, their preferred online store, whatever. But trying to pull that sale through that channel once the interest has already been expressed. So we go through a lot of effort to make sure that we're putting that product in front of the retailers, but also putting it in front of consumers with the intent of them going back and ordering it through the retailer. The magazine has, game-related articles, previews, reviews of games, game designer notes. We've got Dork Tower, which is an excellent comic by John Kovalik, which runs a monthly strip in there. And the idea of all of it, though, is to pull those eyes to the center section of the magazine. There's a pre-order guide so that people can see what's coming up and let their store know, because the store's going to base their order for product off of what they believe they can sell. If 10 people in a store say, hey, I want this product, that retailer knows they should order more than 10, because it's more than just the people that said that they wanted it. There's others that'll likely want it too. Absent that, the store may order 5 or 6 if they think it's a great game. And then there's 4 people that would be out because they didn't have it, right? From there, we take that, we use historical numbers that we look at over similar games, similar game types, time of release in the year, and we determine how much over the pre-orders that we've got expressed we order with the intent of having product for 6 weeks. I want to have the product land, me be in stock for 6 weeks, and then if I start selling quicker, 6 weeks to 2 months, if I start selling it quicker, I can place a restock and then hopefully not run out of that product. And then we make sure that we've got that product to the store shelves. We try and keep product on for restocks as they're placed. A retailer orders a product, they're paying, depending on the product, anywhere from 40 to 50% off for most products. So they're making close to a turnkey. If a retailer buys 3 copies of a game and sells 2, they've broken even. They haven't started to make a profit. They haven't started to pay for the game space. They haven't started to pay for the lights. They haven't started to pay for anything. They've got to sell 3 out of 4 copies before they're actually making a profit. On the distribution end, it's more like 18 or 19 out of 20. Now, we work in volume, so clearly I'm not trying to hand sell each individual copy. But as a result, on the distributor end, there's a very real risk of being caught. And as you were walking around in the warehouse, I can show you the wall of shame, right, where we've got product that's been there for a while. There is some product out there that's got dust. You saw some of it. That, and those were products where we may have bought deeper than the need over a matter of years.
The game store does the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
You can't, it is more art than it is science. You can't guarantee what is or is not going to be hot. You can only hedge your bets based on empirical evidence and data that you've mined over the years.
And your expertise and your gut feel for your own community. So the more information we can give you on the front end to make the right decision, the better that's going to be. There's a lot of things that have been playing against that over the last few years. Just the general glut of product, the amount of products that are out there, and then which product catches the eye of the consumer. And then the consumer wants this one that maybe didn't get ordered deep. But the one misunderstanding that a lot of people would have at the end consumer level is product being out of stock quickly means that everybody failed to do their job. I would argue that guesses may have been made wrong, but everyone's trying. No one wants to not sell a product. There's not a single person involved anywhere in the chain that's saying, twirling their mustache, I don't want to sell more than 6 of this. It's all a game of trying to manage. I've got to manage my cash flow. I've got 18,000 items in the warehouse you just walked through. I've had as much as 22,000 items on shelf at a time. Every one of those I want to make sure that I've got supply for. But we're going to guess wrong on some. And in some cases, cash flow becomes an impediment to being able to get that, to stock it as deep as we would like. And every mistake we make impedes the cash flow, and this is true at the retail level as well, impedes the cash flow of being able to buy the next one, and buy the next one, and buy the next one. And just like retailers, distributors face challenges. If I've got somebody that walks up and says they'll offer a product I'm selling at a reasonable wholesale, but they'll give it to them for 2% cheaper. Well, retailers face that all the time with online companies that are, I'll sell it to you cheaper. But if I have a friendly local game store that I go to, and I choose to buy from a cheaper source, but then I'm going to go play at that local game store, what am I adding to their ability to be there to service me? What am I adding to that ability to be there for me in the future? And that goes for all levels of the business, is what can we do to make sure that we're providing a value not the cheapest cost, which is been a mentality we've seen a lot in all businesses, let's face it, since the advent of Amazon and online buying, but really getting to the point of seeing what services can we provide if we're making the margin that we need in order to flourish. In our case, we've got what I believe to be the best website in the industry. We just published some tools to help stores in the current environment be able to more easily put up a Shopify account. For a lot of stores, there's a lot of stores in our business that do no online business. And right now, they're having to do curbside at best or delivery, them delivering product themselves. Well, enabling them to be able to do Shopify. What tools can I give them to make that easier? What information can I hand? And we're constantly trying to look for new advents there. But the other challenges we face are the same one anyone in logistics would face, and that's getting product picked, getting it out on time, getting it out correct, and getting it out undamaged. And we have challenges there like everybody does. Certainly we just rebooted after 7 weeks closed because of the COVID-19 and had over the course of 2 days a record number of orders placed that ever in the history of the company. Best year, best Christmas. Never had 2 days with more orders placed than those first 2 days we were open because there was this back demand. It took us over a week at most of the warehouses and a week and a half to 2 weeks at one to get caught up from that initial wave. But our goal is to give good service, to get product out correct, to get it on time, to get it undamaged, to get what you wanted, to order enough that you've got it. And there's all these competing needs that have to be out there and that we have to be looking at. So that's what all kind of rolls into that customer service, is making sure that we've got the right operations staff to be able to quickly and accurately pick those orders. And you've seen the system out there. It's a huge change from just a few years ago when you were visiting the warehouse. There's constant cost for upgrading the infrastructure and upgrading the technology and upgrading the capacity. Now with COVID, we've got very real restrictions as far as how many people can be in an area and people needing to be able to disinfect a zone when they leave it, and somebody comes to the work zone, they disinfect it when they come back in. There's all kinds of new impediments that we've got.
I mean, now that I haven't been here, you guys are going to have to get a whole new building.
Oh, they're out there fumigating now. So I guess to say this, there's a lot of challenges that come along with customer service, and the idea of it is I need to do it right, and where I don't do it right, I need to make the person whole that I was servicing. If there's a retail store and their product arrived damaged, but they got a customer that wanted that product, I need to recognize that store looks bad to that customer. How can I make them whole by taking care of this quickly? How can I make them whole by making sure that in taking care of them, the customer knows that it wasn't the store's fault? That comes to some creative solutions sometimes when issues go really bad. We have had UPS trucks burn with people's shipments on them. We have had FedEx trucks overturn. We've had all kinds of weather situations can hold up stuff. But what can we do in those situations to make everybody whole? Not just, I want to check the box that I got you what you wanted. I want to look at what I can do to make you whole in the eyes of your customer, and so that you know that mistakes are going to happen. We're going to try and minimize them. We're always trying to make less of them and less of them. What can we do when something fails to make you whole? And in the end, that's the essence of customer service, is when you don't get it right, what do you do to make it right?
The thing that's really interesting to me is the synergy between marketing and customer service. You're reaching out, you're addressing issues that the consumer may have on the distribution level. You have a better understanding of them because you're trying to resolve their issues and meet their needs, which probably gives you some unique insight into how to market to those same retailers. So what is your marketing responsibility like?
We look at opportunities again. Primarily, we're trying to help pull those consumers through the store, and that involves the pre-work that we do with that Game Trade, some of the videos we do with the Game Trade media for various demos and Q&As and some webinars on various products. We also do in-store marketing. We've done signage. We've won gold awards with the In-Store Marketing Association for some of the work we did with some cooperative marketing in the past. Was with Wizards of the Coast, some calendars, some various in-store opportunities to present brands, and also in something that's useful in the store. Right now, like you saw in the office, we've got a movie marquee poster that's in 325 stores, shooting for 375 in the next couple of months. So it's a backlit basically that can change out every month for different games that are coming up. Header card for coming soon, kind of playing off the movie theme, now playing, but also staff picks or learn to play or ask for a demo, all focused on getting people inquiring about different titles, stuff that's coming up, talking about it ahead of time, getting excited about it now that it's in, and being able to kind of shout out to people a lot of our stores, if the general public, now it's gotten a lot better now. I think there's a lot more people that are aware of our kind of gaming, both from the aisle in a mass market store as well as from friends that are playing, a lot more than it used to be. But there's still a lot of people in the general public, if they walked by one of our game stores and looked in, they would have no idea what they're looking at, because they're looking and they're not seeing Monopoly, they're not seeing Scrabble, they're not seeing what they interpret as a game. They're seeing a lot of bright colors and a lot of miniatures and statues, and they don't quite know what it is. Well, we want to put some opportunities for stores to have in the window, shouting out about these games that are coming, and entice people to come in and say, that Harry Potter thing, what's going on? Or that, and yes, that's still got legs now. It is amazing to me that it does. Other product lines that are out there are things that are connected to what's going on in pop culture with the superhero movies, and there's a game that's tied in, or Star Wars, and there's a game that's tied in. Being able to take people from the outside of the store and get them to give a second look at the store that they might not have given before. And also to take people that are excited about our industry and go, that's out finally, and have them come running into your store to get it. We look for opportunities with shelf talkers and other things that we can do in store as well. Kind of use some best practices from the general shopper marketing aspect of how to convert a browser to a buyer, how to point them in the direction of product that we know is going to appeal to a broad base, and then how to get them to be able to close that sale.
So do you guys have a Back the Comeback marquee poster that fits inside that backlit thing?
Why, yes, I do.
So now that I've asked this question about Back the Comeback, Mike, I was last night I was waiting for my Call of Cthulhu Zoom game to start, and you and I both being people who have an affinity for toy soldiers, I was looking at Reaper's website and I saw this little yellow, hey, Back the Comeback, and I was like, I know what that is, but I suspect that my listeners do not, unless they've seen that logo, that icon someplace. So if you could learn us on what is Back the Comeback.
So Back the Comeback is really a multi-pronged effort, but mostly it's a social media effort to point consumers to retail stores. Retail stores have had a tough time of it. Again, many of them were closed. We're back to the point where I think the last surveys we did, about 75% of retailers in the country are operating to some level. That can be they're, doing curbside pickup, or they're doing online sales. And that may have edged up since I did that survey to about 85%. But there's still a lot of people that were closed for a long period of time. A lot of people that are operating at less than their most efficient way of doing business. They can't have customers in store. Even areas where you can have customers in store, it's, there's some limitations that we haven't seen previously on how many people you can have in the store. The masks that we wore as we were walking around the warehouse here, just out of protection for others. There's a lot of things that are going on. So the idea of Back the Comeback is that our comeback is going to be bigger than our setback. A lot of stores have had issues. Alliance and Diamond Comics both had to close distribution centers. So there were some weeks where we were not shipping product.
The Jeppy Family Industries, they own Diamond Distributors and Alliance.
And Alliance, that's correct. So the concept of Back the Comeback is we want to point people to good stores. There was a social media challenge where a lot of celebrities, as well as a lot of people in the industry, were giving shout-outs to their local stores, the stores that mattered to them, as well as challenging their friends to do the same. Try and create, some awareness out in general of the industry and what it is we stand for and what it is that we do, these stories that we tell together and that we enjoy together and that bring people together in times that we need that more than ever, and understanding each other more than ever. And it also was about creating an opportunity. There's some charities that have done a lot of work. The Book Industry Charitable Foundation. They are in the book industry. They've helped some game stores, some comic stores, and independent bookstores, which carry a lot of pop culture items as well. They've helped the store owners be able to pay some bills during this time. They've given out a tremendous amount of money as a charity to help people make it through the tough time. The Jack Vassell Fund is run by Tom Vassell from the Dice Tower, and the Jack Vassell Fund is not purely company oriented. It's more focused on individuals within the game industry. But they have helped out with people that have had medical needs, that have had, had crises that have come up for years. These charities have been hit hard over the last few months with what's going on in the general economy as well as specifically in the business. So we've got a big charity auction coming up, and that's going to be running July 4th through July 18th with Diamond International Galleries. Online auction. We've got a lot of really amazing items from both the hobby game side and the pop culture side and also the comic side. A couple of the big ticket items. We've got an original Cho painting that's going to be going.
You said Frank Cho, C-H-O Cho?
Frank Cho, C-H-O.
Okay,
Go online and take a look at backthecomeback.com. Take a look at the auction page on that, and you will see that there's an Emma Frost painting. Absolutely gorgeous and original and that's going to be part of that auction. Peter Adkison. Okay, Peter Adkison was the original owner of Wizards of the Coast. Peter Adkison donated an uncut beta press sheet. We're talking the second release of Magic. Alpha and beta were two different releases. Alpha was the first one. Those card angles, corners are cut a little different. So really, beta's the one that most people look at as the most valuable, right? A beta uncut sheet, black border, of cards from Magic. And that's an auction item. The last time one of those sold, it was a set of 3 and it went for $27,000, and that was over 10 years ago. So this is something, that we estimate on the low end, $8,000 or more, that's going to go straight to the charities that have been helping people out that are in our industry.
And now, I have a penchant for the conspiratorial. I am of the opinion that the value of that specific item I'm concerned about, because I think WotC is going to go out of their way to shit the bed on the secondary market and go exclusively digital. I think that in a few years' time, we will not see print Magic cards anymore. We will only see Magic the Gathering digitally. Well, I'm still working on the Asmodee buys ACD conspiracy, so I've got my homework to do on the WotC conspiracy.
I'll stay out of all of those conspiracy theories. From what I've seen, there is definitely a lot of focus on the digital, but the physical is still where the majority of the money is, right, and the majority of the collector's activity.
Until WotC starts doing reprints of super old expensive cards and undercuts the secondary market, which they swear to God, they don't pay any attention to the secondary market. Again, this is Mike Brodeur, not Mike Webb saying this. And see, I'm making you uncomfortable, so I'm going to shut up. Let's move on to something more fun. All right, so Mike, I have a theory. You grew up around the same time period that I did. So I was born in 75. So you're what, 70?
1970.
Now you're born 1970. When I was a kid, and I know many people around my age group within, plus or minus 5 years that had a similar experience of finding pornography in the woods. Now, I'm not going to talk about pornography, and I know you're a religious guy, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable and be vulgar.
I actually discussed that in a sermon recently.
So fair enough.
For what it's worth.
All right. So I have a similar experience that I think that for my generation, people that really, really came into the hobby did so by shoplifting from Walden Books. And that if you were gonna play Dungeons and Dragons as a teenager in the 80s, you didn't have the disposable income. I must have shut down personally at least one Walden Books on the theft of Dungeons & Dragons product that I have done, and will feel forever guilty. Do you have a Walden Books shoplifting story?
I do not. But the reason I do not,
because you're
let me be
you're
clear.
Not a sack of crap like me.
No, because I've got a mom that never bought into all of the satanic panic issues, and that kept me very well stocked, let's say, with the product.
Oh, okay. Well, now again, not to conflate the two, but
you can just edit that out if you don't want to make that public.
No.
I'm not quite sure what the statute of limitations is.
On petty theft, it's fucking nothing, man. I mean, Barnes and Noble not Barnes and Noble, but Walden Books, they can come after me. And
you do know Barnes and Noble's putting your picture up in every store now saying, do not let this guy in.
The most expensive things that I own are in this room with you right now. So if they want to take this recording equipment, I'm like, all right, guys, sorry. Well, Mike Webb, you have been super, super delightful.
It's absolute delight to talk to you, Mike.
I could ask you questions all day about the industry and what have you. I'm just a regular gamer, regular consumer. I really don't think about Alliance or ACD or what other distributors are out there. I just go into my FLGS. I buy product. What do I do as the consumer to support distributors?
Sure. I think supporting the stores helps support distributors, period. What I think gamers should be doing, just from not just a business perspective, again, clearly, I want scotch and scones till I die, and to do that, this industry has to survive and keep going. But I think what gamers can do to broaden their world too, be an evangelist for gaming. Be someone who people want to game with. Go show games to people. Go share the joy across the table, not just over a phone, clicky, or on a console, but sit across the table and smile with somebody and tell a story together. And that doesn't mean just role playing. If I'm playing a board game, if I'm playing Ticket to Ride, I'm telling a story together because we're laughing and talking every bit as much as we're playing the game. Spread the news of that and how much fun we can have together socializing while we're playing, which is something that up until a few years ago, it seemed like we were losing. as more and more digital options came out to play. But in the end, let's play games together, because when we play games together, we learn about each other. Some of our assumptions about other people evaporate. We smile, we laugh, endorphins are released, and we all come to just be better people to be around. And if you do that, I am convinced that gaming is such a compelling thing to do. If you're doing that, people are going to start looking for ways to do it. Point them back to your local game store. Don't necessarily say, hey, go look on Amazon and see it. If there's a game store locally that's letting people come in and experience games, talk that up. Point people to them. Let them know that this is my third place. This is my Cheers. This is where I go to feel special and loved and known. And this is a community that's open and welcoming to everybody, and we want you there. We want you to be part of this because it's joy, and I want you to do it. So if you want to know how you can support the business overall, support that friendly local game store. Be sure that you're pointing back to them. Be sure that you're doing your business with them. Maybe if it's a few points different, you know what? It's worth it for the experience you have of walking into that third place.
Well, Mike Webb, thank you so much. If people want to support, if just the regular listener wants to support Back the Comeback, where do they go?
Go to backthecomeback.com. All the information is there. And, take a moment. If you've got a store that you love, go on your social media, use the hashtag BackTheComeback, and post about the store that you love and why you love them. And then reach out to 2 or 3 of your friends and challenge them to do the same thing.
Well, Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you.